Hello, and live from the edge of the Great Red Divide, this is the Heartland Mamas podcast. I am your host, Heidi Henry. Hello, everyone. Today, I wanted to talk to you about what happened on January 9th in Brazil and why it has ties to January 6th of 2021 to our own Washington, D.C. insurrection promoted, as we've seen in the January 6th hearings, by Donald J. Trump, our former president. In Brazil, and the reason this is important is the fact that Bolsonaro, who was in charge of Brazil for the last 4 years, was always referred to himself as mini Trump. Always. He loved his ideology and wanted to be just like him. And we saw that happen in policies that he had in deforestation and ending climate regulations in his country, and in how he handled the COVID crisis, as well as cutting social programs that affected the poor and disadvantaged the most, just like Donald Trump. He wanted to be just like him. So what happened is that Luiz Bolsonaro lost to, Bolsonaro lost to Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who was the former president of Brazil and once called the most popular politician on earth by our own former president, Barack Obama. And da Silva rose up through the ranks. He was a populist president. He was a poor man growing up, or a poor child and a poor man growing up in his adult life. And he came from the working class people and rose all the way up to be president. And when he became president, he started a lot of social programs to help the people of Brazil. And Brazil is one of the most prosperous countries on earth, and he helped Brazil, all the people of Brazil, feel that prosperity all the way down the ranks, from the very mighty to the very poor and destitute. And if anybody knows the backstory of Brazil, you know that they have a terrible street urchin, children living on the street population issue. They've suffered a great deal of poverty. A company I used to work for used to do a lot of work in Brazil just to try to help the street urchins mostly, have a place to eat and some place to sleep where it was safe. And these kids would be turned loose when they were really, really tiny. So their survival rate was really low. And so da Silva came in and he fixed a lot of those issues and really cut that poor population down dramatically by food, housing, and shelter, what everybody needs, the basic rights that citizens should have. And especially in a prosperous country, there should be no people that are sick and dying and homeless and hungry. And so that's what da Silva did. So Bolsonaro came in, like every president that comes in from the right. They don't deserve that. They're not working hard enough. They need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And he followed in the ideology of Donald Trump and decided to be just as hard and tough on people as he could possibly be. So what happened is that Bolsonaro lost to da Silva. Da Silva lost to Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro then lost to da Silva in October. And on January 1st, da Silva was to become the new president, or returning president of Brazil. And Bolsonaro had, like Trump had done, called the election results false and said that the election was stolen and that his presidency was stolen. And look at how horrible da Silva is, because da Silva got caught up in a corruption scheme that everything points to the fact that his conviction was overturned, points to the fact that it was brought up, made up stuff just to get him out of the presidency so Bolsonaro could step in. So now da Silva is back in and Bolsonaro is out. And Bolsonaro, instead of congratulating the new president, took off and went to Florida. And he landed in Orlando. I guess he's got family in Kissimmee, right outside of Orlando. So that's where he stayed. He's been briefly hospitalized since then. I think that's like a play for our sympathies, but I'm not very sympathetic toward him. Because even though he condemned the violence in his country, and what happened in Brazil on the 9th, this past Sunday, was exactly what happened on January 6th, here in Washington, D.C. So people stormed the Capitol and the Supreme Court and in their upper and lower houses and smashed glass, broke in, defecated, urinated on stuff, tore up documents, stole artwork, destroyed artwork. It was exactly the same, chanting the same things, that the election was stolen and that they wanted Bolsonaro back. The reason this is important is that January 9th could not have happened without the same financial interest and the same people advising the far right of Brazil as advised the far right in the USA and is still advising. And we're talking about Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller and all of that ilk, okay? So those are the same people, the Trump family, all of them are advising Bolsonaro and staff. And the same people are also helping to finance. And let me explain that, how that's really huge. Because the people of Brazil have, De Silva, the new president, has pledged to go after those that finance this. These huge riots can't happen in a vacuum. They absolutely, positively have to have financing in order to happen. This isn't an accident. And what they found in Brazil is strong ties to agribusiness, and ConAgra is one of those. ADM, Archer Daniel Midland, and some of the others are some of the names that are being brought up. Now, they're still tracing that money back, but why they're really interested in investing in the riots in Brazil is Bolsonaro rolled back, does this sound familiar? Rolled back the equivalent of their EPA restrictions on chemicals, pesticides, and herbicides, okay? He rolled back a lot of the things that hampered the growing of crops in Brazil. And you have to understand, Brazil under Bolsonaro was at an all-time high of deforestation in the rainforest. Okay, so if you picture Brazil, how big it is, a lot of it's under a canopy of trees in the rainforest. And what Bolsonaro wanted to do is just plow it all under and let's grow crops, because Donald Trump had put embargoes and tariffs on exports of grain to China and Mexico. So the Chinese and the Mexicans were going to need to get grain from somewhere. So Bolsonaro was ready, and actually, if you look at it, preparing for that event by plowing under and cutting down and deforesting the rainforest. Now the rainforest is the lungs of the world. The rainforest, there's several rainforests around the world, but the one in Brazil is probably the best known. When we refer to the rainforest, we refer to the one in Brazil. There's several around the world. There's the Raincoast Conservancy in British Columbia and Canada, which is gorgeous if you ever get a chance to go up there. But what happens in the rainforest is also there's indigenous tribes that live there. And Bolsonaro was really great at executing under police actions the people that live there, saying that they were the aggressors. Well, if you live in the rainforest and you hunt your food and you stay in the rainforest and you don't bother anybody, I don't know how you can be the aggressor except when somebody's cutting down your home, right? So yeah, then they got a little aggressive. They came were wiping them out and wiping out their homes so that they could steal their land. Oh, does this sound familiar? And then plant crops in it and sell it to the rest of the world. So it turns out, or it's looking very likely, that big ag, not just the big ag in Brazil, but also with branches in the United States or founded in the United States, helped fund these riots on January 9th. And we've also heard that some of this funding, and it would have been through political donations, would have helped fuel January 6th in Washington, D.C. But we will never in this country go after big ag. We will never do it. It will never happen in our lifetime. There are some things that are protected and sacred in the United States, and big ag, which is not farmers. I want you to know this is not farmers. Big ag is corporate. They're the, you know, and see, I don't want to discuss GMOs, but when you think about Roundup and all the people who are sick from using Roundup, Roundup is a chemical developed in the United States that's sold around the world, and the companies that make products like that are big ag. They are big ag, big money, huge amounts of money. So when they knew everybody, in the United States, every 4 to 8 years, we're going to have a change in administration and a change in policy, which gives the world whiplash, right? 1 minute we're embargoing grain and tariffing grain, and the next minute we're not. 8 years later, we're not. And it goes like that with immigration and everything. Any policy we have, we know is going to change every 4 to 8 years. And it does give you whiplash because we don't codify very much, all right? So when we don't codify stuff and Trump comes in and he rolls back everything on the EPA and he guts the EPA so we can't control the pesticides and herbicides that are out there, what happens then is that the big ag is like, yay, let's go, we don't have to be beholden to anyone for anything we do. And they go forward and they do whatever they want. Okay? That's how that works. The same thing happened in Brazil. And the thing in Brazil is because they didn't have environmental regulation and what they had been rolled back, and because Bolsonaro was in charge of what happened to the indigenous population and to the rainforest, all of that was rolled back. And Brazil has a history of having dictators forever, even though they're a democracy. They were a dictatorship for a long time. Long time. And as many people have referred to them, compassionate dictatorships. I'm not sure how that works, but that's exactly how it was put. Is, Bolsonaro's kind of a dictator, but he's a compassionate dictator and he's very business friendly. Well, business friendly does not mean world environmental friendly. And when he lost by like the smallest amount. I think he was like 49.1% and De Silva was 50.9%. I mean, it was so close. That election was so close. It could have gone either way. But they took a long time to certify it, and they got to the end. And one of the things De Silva, who was the president before and is the president now, did was he stopped deforestation of the rainforest. He stopped the burning of the trees and the cutting down of the trees, and he worked to preserve and protect the planet. Those programs that he instilled also benefited the poor the most, and he also protected the indigenous populations. However, by stopping that now we have a stop to big ag in Brazil. And suddenly people are riled up like crazy. And instead of following their democratic elections and believing in them, all of a sudden they're storming the Capitol and smashing the glass and pooping on everything, as Nancy Pelosi would put, poo-poo. But this is what happened. And the fact that the money and the people and the advisors are so tied together, the rhetoric is so tied together, the difference is this time, both former presidents ended up in Florida. Again, my argument for Florida must be cut loose and set free into the Atlantic Ocean. I think it's time. We just say goodbye, Florida, because all the crazies live there, and now Bolsonaro lives there too. Even more reason to never go to Florida again. Never, never, never. I will never go there again. So I want you to think about how those things are connected and how Steve Bannon gave the advice to Bolsonaro and his supporters on how to try to overtake the government, because the people who were protesting were trying to get the military involved. And we came, here on January 6th, we were one limo ride away from a coup. One limo ride away. Mike Pence was standing there at the dock. You can see he was at a dock, where materials come in. And you can see the garbage cans. And he's standing there, and Ron Johnson comes over and says, "Hey, get in my limo. We'll get out of here." Well, if he had gotten in that limo, even though his job of certifying the election was merely ceremonial, it really had no bearing, it could have caused an actual coup, a military coup. That's how close we came. And if you get to read the January 6th reports, which I'm just starting to work my way through, there are things in life that you read that are very tough to read. The Mueller report was one of those slogs. I read the ACA, the first draft, the second draft, and the final draft. The Bible, War and Peace, the Quran, all of those are hard things to read, but really important reads, really important. So you need to slog through them. But as I slog through the January 6th hearing reports, as I'm reading that and reading the stuff at the same time about what happened in Brazil, I'm like, oh my God, this is so similar. this is the same. It's the same thing. It's almost like they're practicing again for another January 6th in this country. So they're like having a dry run, right? It's like what happened in Michigan before January 6th was a dry run for January 6th. Now they tried it again in Brazil on January 9th. So what happens when we go to install either President Biden again, or somebody else wins, that person? What happens? We don't know. We have no idea. So can we count on the peaceful transfer of power anymore? Well, I think back to 2000 when everybody knew that Al Gore, the election was stolen from Al Gore. It was stolen. We all know that. I mean, when you go back and do the forensic, look at the forensic voting, he should have been president. My protest was to leave his sign up until April in my front yard. As an environmentalist, I felt it was the right thing to do. That was the end of my protest. I took it down because I had to do some raking, So, did I storm the Capitol? No, because we have a peaceful transfer of power, and we do elections every 4 years, and we have to expect that somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And if we can't respect that, we lose democracy. And Brazil is a democracy as well, so we don't want to lose them, right? We want them one of the most prosperous countries in the world, in the same, in South America, and we're in North America, and we should all be on the same page, right? We should be supporting one another, not with Steve Bannon, but with really good support. But you have to remember that I believe that January 9th was a dry run in case Biden is reelected. I really believe that. And this time in Brazil, the police were supposedly alerted and prepared, but they really weren't. In fact, they ended up letting go people who deliberately made sure that they were understaffed and undermanned for January 9th. The thing that differed down there is the police stepped in and arrested people immediately on the spot. And then the encampment where they were all hanging out for weeks before this event, they went and arrested 1,500 people there. They are following the money trail back. Now, we've followed the money trail back. We know where it goes here in the United States. We're doing nothing about it. Oh, God, we can't go after business. I mean, we're a capitalist country. Why would we do that? Ever since Ronald Reagan said, the government is not here to help you, or however he said that, it caused people to distrust what the government is actually doing. So here's what I'd like to say. The responsible citizens in the democracy of Brazil democratically elected a new president. And they expected a peaceful transfer of power. And they did get that. January 1st, they had a ceremony. It was a big deal. It was wonderful. It was a beautiful ceremony. I watched it, even though I don't speak nor understand Portuguese. But I watched it, and I read the subtitles. It was a beautiful ceremony. People were happy. But we have to be certain, and we have to be watchful, and we have to be ready for what's going to happen in 2 years in this country. Because right now, our House is a complete mess. Our House of Representatives is a complete mess. What's going to happen in the next 2 years is the circus wagon with no wheels that's being pushed by Jim Jordan, and God knows where it's going to go. Kevin McCarthy has no power. He has no authority. He's given it all up to the very, very far, far ultra-right Freedom Caucus, whose agenda right now is to, the mythical Hunter Biden laptop that nobody can really say for sure was his laptop in the first place. And I'm telling you, if you have a laptop, do you bring it to a blind guy to fix? I'm just asking, do you bring your laptop to a guy that's legally blind to fix? None of that makes sense with Hunter Biden's laptop. So the other thing I wanted to tie into this is the new new representative from New York, George Santos, because he has ties to all of this as well. There's a lot of research that's going on right now, and you have to understand too, Kevin McCarthy will never make him step down, because that would cause a special election in his district. Not an appointee, he'd have a special election, and McCarthy would have an even slimmer margin by one, because I don't think the people of that district in New York would elect another Republican. I just don't see it happening. I don't understand how somebody could lie as much as he did, but the fact that he came up with millions of dollars, some from an Italian financier, some through dark money. But George Santos, remember, is of Brazilian heritage, and he is tied to all of this as well. So the ties are still tenuous. We're trying, because he lied so much. There's so many lies that we have to remove to be able to find out exactly what Mr. White Power Brown Man George Santos really is, or who he really is. That is way out there still. It's gonna come up, and I'm working on that right now to find out how he has, he was elected with a crap ton of dark money, and most of it came from Italy, oddly enough, who's also having its right-wing issues. And some of that dark money does have ties back to Russia, and of course he's Brazilian. He was a poor Brazilian man that suddenly had a whole lot of money and a whole lot of lies and was elected to serve in our House of Representatives. So there's a lot of things going on here, not a lot of answers, but I do believe that you can safely say that what happened January 9th in Brazil was another dry run, like they started with Michigan, tried to take over the Michigan House, right, the governor's office. Then they came January 6th, thought they were ready, they weren't. Now they're practicing in Brazil on January 9th of this year, and 2 years from now, if we aren't ready, we are totally screwed, and that's the honest to God truth. So we need to be ready for this. We need to fight fascism wherever it is, in this country and other countries. We need to fight fascism. We can't go on with a fascist state. Every 80 years we have a rise in fascism around the world. I contend that it's because a generation has died out and the stories have died out with it. So it's important. That's why history books are so important, so we can keep relearning the history of the world so that we don't keep devolving into fascism over and over again. Anyway, so that's all for today. This is Heidi Henry from the Edge of the Great Divide, the Heartland Mamas podcast. We'll see you soon. Take care now, everybody. Bye-bye.